Hello, this is Chase Hunter, IUS Bocce Chair, here for the review of the 2019-2020 Official Rules and Coaches Resources Manual for Interscholastic Unified Indoor Bocce. Our first page here is our table of contents. And let's jump right into it. So we have our official rules and overview of the Unified Bocce program. Okay. Our bocce courts are 60 feet long by 12 feet wide. These are good measurements to know if you are taping down your practice areas, and are, as you can see from the graphic here, okay, we have a 60-foot long court, and at each 20-foot mark, you sort of have your boundary lines. So your red lines here are your lines where if you're starting from this side of the court, you're going to be functioning inside this player's box here. If you're starting from this side of the court here, you're going to function inside the player box here. These lines and such will be important when we go through the stages of play and deployment of bocce balls. But this is your basic court setup here. With bocce, you have two sets of bocce balls, 4 in each set. Our typical colors are red and green. You have a link here for Bubba Bocce that can give you some extra information on the equipment, the gel they're filled with. It's also a place where you can sort of get an idea of cost and purchase. Our USBF official weight and size for our bocce ball is 920 grams and 107 millimeters in diameter. And your size and regulation information is contained in that paragraph. Very important to know the gel filling for Bubba Bocce balls is completely inert. It's non-toxic. It's safe and easy to clean up, and you really only need soap and water. I can tell you from getting this stuff in my hands, it is not difficult to clean up at all. And I've have not experienced any sort of safety issues with them. This is a completely safe fill for anyone who comes in contact. For your roster and lineup composition, your bocce teams can be no less than 4 people, and you cannot have a team that is greater than 8 players. So your max is 8, your minimum is 4. Now we'll show down at the further in the guide where you can have different combinations and how you would sort of work those combinations. We are shooting for at least 50% athletes, which would be your players with an intellectual other type of disability, and the remaining players would be those without disability. And of course, as I'm doing this, I'm getting an error here. My end looks like it's taken care of. Here we go. So we're trying to foster a true inclusive environment. So we're looking, if you have a team of 4, minimum of 2 students with disabilities, 2 students without. Okay, and we really strive to be very close to the 50-50 rule. If there's any questions about your 50-50 rule or composition, please be sure to email me, and email will be further along in this presentation. A frame consists of both teams' sets of bocce balls, red and green, being deployed and delivered into the playing area. Now your team, while you have 8 eligible players to play, you can have a team of 10 players, which would have 2 alternates. And with your alternates, you're looking for an alternate for each player type. So like an athlete and your partner, that's what we're looking for there. And let's see. When you have your team, so you need to have at the start of each frame 4 players at the end that you're starting at. If you have like a team of 6, for example, you could have 4 players meeting the 50-50 rule. at one end and 2 players sitting at the other. And then you would have your, 2 players of what roles that are not at the other end travel. Like I said, we're going to go through that portion down below. There's a couple of examples of how that would play out. And here is that page. So we have some visuals here. So for example, if you look up here, we have players, this is a team of 6. We have players A, B, C, and D starting off. They would deploy their bocce balls here. And then in frame 2, you would have, it looks like players A and B traveling. The way your travel would work, like I said, for in this example, let's say players A and B were your athletes, C and D were your partners. In the next frame, your athletes would travel to the other end and meet your other players or partners. If you had a team that was more athletes than partners, then you would have, or if it was more partners than athletes. No, I'm saying that wrong. If it was more athletes than partners, so let's say in this scenario, C, D, E, and F were athletes and A and B were partners, you would have your partners travel down the court as well. So this visual really gives you an idea of how that traveling would work. Like I said, you may not follow this exact switching of players. The important thing here is that we're maintaining our 50% rule and that everyone's getting a chance to deploy bocce balls and play. If there's any questions at all about this, I know last year a couple reps and coaches sent me some emails concerning how this would work, how the I call this a float, how the float would work. Feel free to shoot me an email, and we can tease that out to make sure that that is as fair as possible. Substitutions. We have our guidelines here for substitutions. Substitutions are essentially allowing the ability for more students to be able to play. We are not crafting substitutions to be people we put in at critical times or to try to score points. We're not looking for any ringers here. And then you have the parameters here that apply. Players with the lowest assessment score shall roll in the first frame. This is a precaution against coaches disguising a ringer. Substitutes may only be designated for teams consisting of 8 players. Teams with less than 8 players will enter every player in the playing lineup. So, for example, if you have a team of 5 and you have 2 players that could join that team, they would not join as alternates. They would join as actual players on the team. Your substitutions must occur for like roles. So, for example, if you have one substitution that is an athlete, you can only substitute that one in that particular player in for another athlete. If you've got a full team of 8, your substitutes should be an athlete and a partner. Substitutions only occur at the end of the frame, so you're not going to substitute mid-frame. Only one substitute per role may be allowed per team per match. Substitutes may take the place of any player of like role on a team and may substitute for different players on the team during different matches. Once a player is substitute for, he or she may not re-enter into the same match unless in the case of an emergency upon approval of competition managers. So said emergencies might be, if there's an injury, or if there is any sort of complication that may be related to disability, to where that particular player cannot continue, and you have a substitute for that particular role, then you could substitute another time during the game. Any issues like this whatsoever during district play, please be sure to find your representative, your district rep, to oversee that decision. Or at the state competition, please try to find anyone, any Special Olympics of Maryland personnel. You'll be able to see us by our shirts. We'll have our logos, viewable. Find one of us, and we'll be able to, assist with making sure that this is on the up and up. It's strongly encouraged that your substitutions happen halfway through the match, when one team has scored 8 points, or at halftime. That's when typically the best possible place that we suggest and that to happen. Your length of match is 16 points, or the designated time limit has reached. The recommended time is 30 minutes. You'll see that 30-minute time frame, in state competition, and that is your length of time. In a dual match, when only two teams are playing, one format used is sort of a best 2 out of 3, with each game concluding at 16 points or a previously established time limit has lapsed. I know during my coaching time, some of our local games, due to the time frame that they would be played at, you might see a game go for 20 minutes. I've seen them as low as 15 minutes, but just making sure that everyone gets equal playing time, and then that would be your time frame, and you wouldn't deviate that once you decided that prior to the match's beginning. For our sequence of play, one team, like I said earlier, has 4 green bocce balls. The other team has 4 red bocce balls. In an underhand delivery style, these bocce balls will be tossed in a single frame. Each player will stand behind the foul line when delivering bocce balls to Polina, and you can see the graphic kind of below as I go through these next points of where your player is going to start and deploy. You have a coin flip at the beginning again to determine which team rolls or tosses the Polina first. The team winning the coin flip also selects color of bocce ball to use. Each team has 3 attempts to roll or toss the Polina past the midcourt line, having it stop before the foul line on the opposite end of the court. So if you notice, this gold box area here is where we want the Polina to land and be able to play. All right, so it must cross this line here, and it needs to stop in this area here. Okay, now if the Polina gets moved at any point and it gets moved down here, that is completely legal. What we are talking about here is the initial tossing out of the Polina. Some notes here. At no time does a team lose its earned Polina advantage being able to deliver the first ball. The player for the winning team winning the coin toss with the Polina advantage must also deliver the first bocce ball. So what that means here is that whoever successfully deploys the Polina into the golden box here must also, that same player will toss the first bocce ball. You're not going to have one player toss the Polina and then have another player toss the first bocce ball. One designated person from each team, each frame will attempt all 3 attempts at the Polina. This is kind of a new wording here for our guide. A team may designate a different player of the team for each frame, but the same person who is picked to toss out the Polina must also toss out the first bocce ball. Okay? Now, each frame, you could have the exact same person toss out the Polina and the first bocce ball, or you can switch players every frame. Okay, it can be a different player. So, for example, when I coached, part of my strategy was I had, for my team of 8, I had 4 at one end, 4 at the other. Those players had a schedule of who was going to deliver what. So I would have the same athlete put the Polina out and roll the first bocce ball for every frame, and I wouldn't deviate from that. That was part of our strategy. There was no ringer situation whatsoever. We just had a bocce ball deployment order, and that's what we followed. I'll play with coaches where they switch that up and they rotate the player who deploys the Polina. That is up to the coach/team's choice. Whenever I employed my order, I made sure that my players are okay with that. And they, would essentially help me craft who would be the order, which made them okay with that. I would not suggest any coach try to enforce an order when their players aren't really thrilled with it. That sort of hurts the spirit of play and the spirit of competition there. So definitely be sure as you are setting up what your strategies may be or may not be, that you're making sure that your players are good with it. Once again, I just keep stressing at any point, if there is questions with what you see here, please shoot me an email and let me know, and we will be sure to get those answered. Point C here, if the initial placement of the Polina is less than 12 inches from the sideboard, the official will move the Polina away from the sideboard so there is a 12-inch separation. After the initial placement, the Polina cannot be moved, can be moved by a bocce ball anywhere inside the court, including against the sideboards. However, the Polina may never come to rest closer than the half-court line, or the frame is considered dead. So a couple things said in this paragraph here that are kind of important. If when the Polina is initially sent, if it's within 12 inches of the sideboard, the official will take a tape measure and move the Polina out from the sideboard, so there is a 12-inch separation from the side of Polina and the side of the sideboard. If the Polina gets knocked close to the board by a bocce ball, there is no separation there. That Polina is left where it's supposed to be, and play will continue. Now, the last sentence, however, the Polina may never come to rest closer than the half-court line, 30-foot line, or the frame is considered dead. If for some reason a bocce ball were to knock a Polina backwards and it was to cross that center line, the frame's dead. This is a situation that, in my experience doing this, I've never seen this happen, but if it were to happen for whatever reason, goes past that halfway point backwards, frame is considered dead. No player may play his or her bocce ball until the Polina is at complete rest, or if the player is second in line, third in line, or the last in line, they cannot deploy their bocce ball until all bocce balls and Polina on court have stopped moving. I'm sure with some of our seasoned personnel in indoor bocce have seen that sometimes that ball takes a while to come to rest due to how the floor might be shaped, or potentially the quality of bocce ball. At times can keep that ball rolling. Sometimes the ball might creep really slow into its final position, and there is a moment of waiting that needs to occur. And that's something that's very important for you to train your players in seeing and doing, is to make sure that once they put that Polina out, they must wait until it stops. After the first player delivers Polina and first bocce ball, all right, the opposing team will then roll their next bocce ball. Okay, so you're not going to continue rolling on the same team. After the Polina and let's say Polina and red ball is delivered, it'll be green turn to go. After we deliver the second bocce ball, okay, whatever team has its color of bocce ball closest to the Polina will step aside and the other team will roll. So whoever is in scoring position with their bocce roll, the other team will go. Okay? There's a sentence here that talks about the best way to remember to roll is if your team's bocce ball is close to the Polina, you don't roll another ball and you switch off to the other team. This sequence will continue until all four bocce balls are delivered for the frame. Okay, so it may go back and forth. If you have red close, green rolls, happens to get closer than that red, then you have red go next, and it can go back and forth. I've seen games where green rolls out first and is close, and it takes red all four balls to get close, and then you'll have green score. It's all about whoever's closest, the opposite team goes. For scoring, all bocce balls that are close to the Polina of the same color are scored. So if you look at our example here, all right, the two red balls that are here are closest. So red would get 2 points. Only scoring bocce balls of the same color get points. So you are not going to have a frame where red gets 2, green gets 1. That's not going to happen. You're either going to have red get their 2, and that's it, or if green happens to be closer, green will get their scoring. All right. In these situations, this is where measuring becomes very, very important, because you could have a green and a red look like they're the exact distance away, but it may come down to an inch or a fraction of an inch. So that's very important that you have a team with your official that is going to help with measuring to ensure that all of the scoring bocce balls are counted. Legal throws. We are looking for throws that do not come above the waist. Okay. Last year, I can tell you that there were a number of throws that occurred that were above the waist and at times weren't caught. This is something that definitely is part of the teaching moment in coaching bocce, is making sure that your throws do not go above the waist. If you look in the two pictures, we have a standing example and a kneeling example. Even kneeling, that ball cannot go above the waist. Even though we're deploying from a much lower altitude from the ground, the throws must go below the waist. If a foul occurs where the official calls a player for throwing above the waist, that ball is immediately dead. And the referee needs to stop that ball before it impacts any other bocce balls or the polina. For your grip, you can grip under or you can do the inverted grip. The key here is that ball is deployed below the waist. If you look in this picture here, that ball looks a little bit above the waist. So it's going to be very careful that if we're going to do an inverted grip, that the coaching / teaching occurs, that grip, that deployment, the release is below the waist. When players are deploying the bocce balls, the player must have at least 1 foot in and on the court. All right. There's a little bit of a word change here. There is strategy in potentially straddling the sideboard. 1 foot must be on the court before, in order for a bocce ball to be deployed and considered legal. We have our line. You cannot touch the line, step on the line. You must have your feet behind the line when a bocce ball is deployed. If foot is on the line when a bocce ball is deployed, that ball is considered dead. And it'll be up to the referee to stop that ball before it impacts any other on the court. Just another reminder: no player can deploy a bocce ball until the polina and or another bocce ball is at rest. When a team goes to deploy the bocce ball and polina, they may use the sideboard for their deployment. That is perfectly legal and okay. If for whatever reason the polina goes out of the court, the frame is considered dead. All bocce balls are brought to the opposite end, and there is no score. Any bocce ball that goes outside of the court is considered a dead ball and removed from play. When measuring, the proper measuring is to measure from the middle of the polina to the edge of the bocce ball. So what would be really good to do here is to have the end of the measuring tape go to the side center of the bocce ball, and your measurement portion where you're going to read is going to be in the top middle of the polina. Ramps, for those whose disability prohibits them from being able to toss a bocce ball using the grips shown. There are different ramps that can be used. The rule behind the ramps is that the player must be able to deliver, and that's pushing or touching their bocce ball on their own. They cannot use a device with a ramp to propel the bocce ball. The player can have help with getting the bocce ball on the ramp, but the bocce ball must be at rest on the ramp, and the player, through their own strength and power, push that bocce ball down the ramp. Coaching. Anytime a player is in the coaching box, whether it's 1 foot or both feet, coaching cannot occur. Talking to that player cannot occur. The only potential exception to this might be with an instructional assistant, but that instructional assistant cannot coach a player in the box. They are there merely to be an assistant to the player being able to be in the box and be positioned. If coaching continues in the box, the first offense is a verbal warning to the coach from the official. Once the verbal warning is issued to the coach, the tournament committee at their discretion can enact any of the following sanctions related to the rule violation in any particular order, meaning that the tournament committee has the discretion to immediately disqualify the team after the second offense. Your sanctions can be a point deduction or a dead ball, coach being removed from the coaching box without the opportunity to be replaced by another coach, or team disqualification. And like I mentioned earlier, there's an exception to this. If a player is unable due to their disability to deliver a bocce ball without appropriate verbal cues, a coach or teammate can step in at this point and give those. They cannot give physical assistance with delivery of the bocce ball. The player needs to be able to independently do that with their arms and or a ramp. And they're with ramp, like I said before, pushing that with their own power. Players with visual disabilities can have a cone or cylinder, or even a person who would stand behind the Polina saying, "I am standing behind the Polina" as a marker. Checking position of points. One player from each team may proceed down the side of the court before delivering his or her bocce ball. Player must remain outside of the court in order to check the position. So if you have bocce balls that are really, really close, a player can come down the side of the court without entering the court to check positioning and see what they may need to do with their strategy. For court access, only one player at a time may access the court during play. Coaches, paraprofessionals are not to be on the court during play. Unless they're like we said above, there's a need that's related to a disability where assistant may be handy. If you look at the visual here, you can see where the coach's box is. That is where the coach is allowed to be. This area is outside of the game area. Use of electronic devices, cell phones, music, headphones, noise canceling are strictly prohibited in the competition area unless designated per IEP accommodation or supplementary aid. Some students, for example, are very sensitive to noise and need noise canceling headphones. So those are allowed. Your AirPods or Beats headphones or anything like that should not be out. Cell phones should not be out whatsoever during play. And if they are, your official, will be directing those to be put away with potential sanctions to come if they're not. Sportsmanship. In the spirit of sportsmanship, at the conclusion of each match, teams should come together and shake hands. Principle of meaningful involvement. The most important one of the 7 criteria for success of a Special Olympics Unified Sports Program is the principle of meaningful involvement. Fundamentally, the principle of meaningful involvement ensures that every player is given an opportunity to contribute to the success of his or her team through their unique skills and qualities. This means that every teammate demonstrates sufficient sport-specific skills and game understanding, plays a valued role on the team that emphasizes his or her personal talents, and has the opportunity to play without heightened risk of injury. All team members must engage and provide their own individual abilities and strengths. In doing so, athletes and partners may have different perspectives. The athletes on the team may not be accustomed to the experience of having their contributions accepted and respected. In addition, partners may need to encourage to play their own personal best while being a good teammate to others. Consequently, when unified sports teams are created, it is extremely important that both athletes and partners are assessed as to their abilities and gameplay. While there could be a noticeable difference in their skills, the coach will be able to observe their overall performance to determine if they have the requisite skills and understanding to safely participate on this team. The goal is that every teammate should play a meaningful role and have the opportunity to contribute his or her strengths to the unified sports team. There should be a quality of social interaction and communication among teammates that allows everyone to participate fully and enjoy a positive experience. Indicators of meaningful involvement when teams compete without causing undue risk or injury to themselves or others. Teammates participate according to rules of competition. Teammates have the ability and opportunity to contribute to the success of the team. Teammates adjust their skills according to those of other players, resulting in improved performance by team members with lesser ability. Meaningful involvement is not achieved when certain team members display superior sports skills without involving their teammates, serve predominantly as on-field coaches rather than teammates or mentors, control most aspects of the game, especially during the most critical periods, do not train or practice regularly and only show up on the day of competition, lower their level of ability dramatically so that they do not hurt others or control the entire game. It's important that all coaches and program leaders understand the principle of meaningful involvement prior to the selection of team members. As you can see, unified sports further meets the mission of Special Olympics and embraces the philosophy and principles of Special Olympics unified sports. Uniform requirements. Participants are required to be in school uniform for all regular season and tournament play. It is the responsibility of the match and tournament director and match officials to enforce these regulations and decisions of the tournament director, and the decision of the tournament director is the final decision. It is very important, guys, when you guys are having your matches at your schools, that you guys really, for good practice, stick to these rules as tightly as possible. Because in tournament play, we are looking to as well, officiate by the letter of this manual. So it's very important that teams are practiced with that, especially when it comes to the cell phone rules. We want to be sure that those are practiced. I know in our day and age, our cell phone is almost like a second or third or extra organ. It's always with us. And it's always being used, and it's very important that our students who function with this as well are practiced in being able to put this away for game time. The same thing goes with uniforms, being sure that you are wearing uniforms for each play and not forgetting those. And when those rules are not being followed, calling those so that, like I said, our athletes have practice with that. The following uniform regulations will be in effect. Uniforms should have the unified sports logo usage. We're looking at our pill-shaped logo here. Okay. Unified sports logo can be printed and embroidered in red, black, or white, as shown. You got to have the pill shape. You cannot have the logo by its own. That's what we're looking for here. And if we look down here, you can see placement of the logo on shirts. It's in places where it can be seen. General specifications for uniforms. The shirt must be either a polo shirt or t-shirt type. Shirt may not be sleeveless. Shirt should be in the school color. However, a black or white shirt with school identification is permitted. We're not looking for plain white shirts, turned inside shirts. We want uniforms to look presentable and appropriate. The shirt should have no other markings on them other than the school name, the player's name, the school mascot, or the normal manufacturer's trim or manufacturer logo. I've seen uniforms, for example, that have everything they need, but then Under Armour's logos on it. That's perfectly okay. Team roster schedules or quotes or sayings are not allowed on the shirts. When standing, apparel must cover the midriff. Bottoms may be shorts, skirts, or athletic pants. Ideally of a school color, black or white, no jeans whatsoever. Please, 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 no jeans. Visible undergarments worn under the uniform must be unadorned of a single solid color. A school name or insignia is permitted, provided it's no larger than 2¼ inches square and the dimensions is larger than 2¼ inches. You need to have proper footwear, please. Athletic shoes, no boots, slippers, flip-flops, open-toed shoes. This is an athletics competition, so we should be having athletic footwear. If there is footwear that is specifically designed for or to accommodate one's disability, that is okay. Please be sure to email me just for clarification, but I'm telling you here in the public forum that is okay. But if there happens to be any questions, just shoot me an email and we'll make sure that everything's good to go. The emailing me about kind of everything's kind of important, because if I know these details when we get to tournament play, I can make sure that everyone else knows these details, or at least knows to reference me on that. Headgear, there's no hats, rimless headwear, including bandanas. Oh, wait, sorry. I read that wrong. Hats, rimless headwear, including bandanas are allowed. Should say no hats, rimless headwear, including bandanas are allowed. Religious, medical-related headwear is permissible. In the outdoor bocce setting, hats are permissible, but for our indoor setting, they are not. Headbands, wristbands, armbands must be of a solid color. If a solid color, a piece of material may be folded, tied, or used as a headband as long as it's not wider than 2 inches. Undergarments. A lot of time, as far as undergarments, it should be worn underneath the uniform top, underneath the uniform bottom. Any of these garments that are extending below the knees shall be unadorned or lacking any sort of embellishment or decoration. They should be of a single color, not necessarily same length. Leggings. Leggings should not show your skin whatsoever. We have very clear pictures here of what is legal and what is not. This is why it's worn under. Both top and bottom do not have to be the same color. Leggings cannot be transparent above the knee unless covered by shorts. Penalties. Players may not begin play with an illegal uniform. If a legal uniform cannot be obtained, the player is disqualified in that event. Uniform violations do not apply during warm-ups. Once the match has begun and a uniform violation is noted, an automatic penalty will be assessed to the player. The player must immediately comply with the uniform rule, or the player will be disqualified from the event. Removing the shirt, appearing with a bare upper body while in competition shall lead to disqualification from the event. Players must be in their uniform, proper school-issued uniforms such as warm-ups, and must wear proper footwear to accept an award. Teams will be division with teams of similar ability levels. Playing against comparable team leads to more enriching, enjoyable competition experience. Player assessments. So we are looking for player assessments to not be conducted sooner than December 16th. All right, so December 16th allows for some practice time, for some play time, in order for the players to develop their skills to be assessed appropriately. During the assessments, players will roll all 8 bocce balls. The coach will only measure the closest 3 bocce balls and record their distance in inches. If the plane is displaced from the original spot at the 30, 40, and 50, it will be replaced on the original spot before the next ball is rolled. All distance must be in inches only. If a distance is a fraction of an inch, round up to the nearest inch. Each player will legally roll, toss bocce balls from behind the foul line and attempt to get his or her as close as possible to the palina. The coach marks on the floor with tape the 3 spots. Spot 1 will be at 30, spot 2, 40, and spot 3 will be 50 feet from the end board. Coaches places the palina in the center of the spot 1, and the player will toss all 8 balls. The coach will measure the closest 3. Then the palina is moved to the spot at the 40 line and the spot at the 50 line. At each of those spots, all 8 are tossed out. Closest 3 are measured in inches. Measurements will be taken from the center side of the bocce ball to the center side of the palina for a total of 9 measurements. These are to be recorded in the appropriate columns next to the player's name on the, and that should be updated to the competition roster and ratings form. The post-registration form is the old language. The new language will be the competition ratings and roster form, and we will talk more about that when we get there. Down here is sort of a best practice. So taking your bocce courts and essentially assembling them in halves next to each other. They'll give you 2 spaces to be able to do your ratings. And from here, it shows you where to measure your lines off. Kind of the easiest thing to do is to measure your lines off in the court first, and then you'll measure your ramp foot line and lines at the bottom. Doing the assessments this way sort of leads to a much faster way of doing it. I've seen some teams do it without the actual sideboards. I would not recommend doing it without those. Our Interscholastic State Bocce Championship will be on February 10th. Our inclement weather date will be February 13th. This will be at Hagerstown Community College. Your address is there. And schedule as follows. 9:30 volunteer registration. 9:10 our schools will be arriving. 10:30 opening ceremonies. 11 competition begins. 4 p.m. and the star is sort of a tentative time. If we finish up earlier or later, that time could adjust. 4 p.m. is award ceremonies. 5 p.m. is departure. Volunteers, if there's anyone who would be available to come volunteer at our state tournament, volunteers at SOME.org is your website to email in, and there'll be exchange of information, and we can get you guys helping. This next page is our competition roster and ratings form. It looks just like the post-registration form, but in reality, the post-season registration language is not accurate for what this form is, so we changed it. It's filled out the same this year, and there will be a video made like the one you're watching now of how to do this, but we are going to do these forms exclusively in Google Drive with folders to be set up and filled by our district reps. Like I said, I will be accompanying this with a video of its own on how to do that process very shortly after this one will be published. So stay tuned for that. But the sheets will be exclusively done in Google Drive. This is going to save a lot of time on my part when I have to go check them. It's going to save a billion emails that you would have to send. Essentially, you would just go input these. Now, I would highly suggest, and it's sort of the logical thing to do, to print these out and fill them out hard copy when you are taking your ratings, but then inputting that information into the digital platform that is Google Drive. Our application for participation here has a little bit of a different look to it. These forms are only filled out once a year. So if you participate in unified tennis or another unified sport at the start of this school year and you fill out this form, your form is good for the season, the entire season. If you have students starting their season with bocce, then they would need to fill out this form. And these forms are to be submitted as instructed by your district representative, or in the absence of a district representative, the Special Olympics Director of Interscholastic Unified Sports. Very important to be sure you fill out all of these areas correctly. Our affirmation of eligibility here, this is where you're going to put all of your students who are participating and fill out the appropriate information, disability or not, gender, date of birth, any sort of devices that they may need to use in order to access play. That's where you would fill this one out, and you will submit these per the direction of your district representative. Here we go. So for our volunteers, we have our Class A form. Class A clearance is required for all non-student athletes. Class A clearances can be acquired by completing 2 short steps. And these clearances are valid for 3 years. The first is a background check, which if you click this link, it'll take it to you. Then you have the protective behaviors training, which must be completed. You'll hit the link here in the guide to get to that. And please be sure you print your confirmation. Just in case in the event that for whatever reason, there's communication steps that show that this isn't done, it's good to have that printed copy handy that you guys could scan and send to us in the event of that need. And then there's a third step here for any minors that are 17 years and younger that are going to volunteer. You want to do this link here for the Special Olympics Maryland Student Minor Volunteer References. All of these documents related to Class A and volunteers should be scanned and emailed to Dottie Rush at coaches@somd.org on or before Friday, December 13th, 2019. And that's not what was going to happen. The next page is your coaches and contact form. And underneath here has Angela's information and my information for contact. And if you guys need anything or have questions, please be sure to reach out to us. We're here for you. Our next page here is our district map of where everyone's coming from who's playing. And then we have our supplements here in the guide. So we have our application form, supplement A. Supplement B is the affirmation of eligibility page. Supplement C is your volunteer application form. Let's see here. Your student minor volunteer references form. And supplement D is our sample score sheet. These score sheets, this is what you should be using in play to track your scores. And that is the end of our guide. I know that prior to the viewing of this video, there was some discussion via email and on our last webinar concerning dates and times of when things are due and potentially some confusion between what coaches should be doing and what the district reps should be doing. It'll be the district reps have the dates of when everything is due, and they will be sending out information of when the dates that they expect the coaches to be turning things in. So those dates, in order to avoid confusion, were not included in this guide. If there are any questions concerning dates and when things are due, or if there's confusion on those dates, as a coach, please be sure to contact your particular district rep. Okay, and then for district reps, any kind of confusion or such, please be sure to email Angela and I. Our information's here. Our cell phones are here too. For me, I'm an educator, so truthfully, email or text messages is probably the best things to get me kind of quick, and then I can also, we can schedule some kind of time as far as communication goes. But that is our review of the 2019-2020 Official Rules and Coaches Resources Manual. I am Chase Hunter, the IUS Bocce Chair, and thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation and get up to speed on some things. And like I've said through the presentation, please don't hesitate to contact us with any questions that you have. Thank you very much and have a great day.